All right, everybody. I should be live, and if I am, please let me know in the chat. And that way we can get started talking about a lot of interesting topics that we need to cover tonight because there's been a lot of issues happening and a lot of disasters that need to be discussed. So, 5x5s are coming in. And of course, as everyone is starting to get into the stream tonight, I do want to mention that Midway USA is the biggest supporter of the channel. Thanks to them, I can get out here, do these live streams, provide you with this information, and get some ideas about gear and equipment that I find to be relevant to preparedness. And of course, magicprepperbeef.com is the direct sponsor of the live streams here that we do on a weekly basis. And if you're looking for shelf-stable beef products that are sous vide, ribeye, New York strip, filet mignon that'll last 10 plus years without any change of packaging or anything like that, make sure you check out magicprepperbeef.com and use the code MAGICPREPPER to get 15% off at checkout. I have a link to that in the description. I'll go ahead and put one in the live chat as well. And then I do want to mention before we really get going into this live stream tonight, I mentioned in a previous video that there was some fires here in my community and some people lost their homes, properties, livestock, all types of things. And I asked if anyone was willing to help that they do so. And of course, lots of people did help. And I just wanted to share that. We had a really good turnout, and I really appreciate the additional donations from my community here. With everything going on with Hurricane Helene and everything else, I know it was tight, and I wasn't necessarily expecting a lot, but we've come together here, and so far, people have donated $660. So I really appreciate that because that's huge. One of the families lost their home, lost every belonging that they had. One of their children goes to school with my kids, and it's just something that's affecting our community greatly, and they need a lot, and this is going to help a lot. So I really appreciate that, and I will definitely keep everyone posted and updated on where that money goes and how those supplies are delivered to the location. So thank you so much for that as a community. You guys are amazing. Now, tonight's topic is interesting, okay? We have, first off, we're going to just talk about this Category 5 Hurricane Milton situation, just to give you some ideas about what's going on there, especially for those who are possibly in the affected area, because you need to be aware of where things are heading and also be aware of what to be prepared for. And then we're going to talk about a lot of lies being spread about the Hurricane Helene disaster relief. But the lies aren't the ones that are being talked about from the mainstream sources. And it's very concerning to me because what's happening is that the government is twisting this incompetent response from the federal government when it comes to emergency aid and disaster relief. They're twisting it into a problem of disinformation and misinformation, and they're using that as a way to leverage further censorship in the future when it comes to any large-scale disaster scenario. And I honestly believe that's what we're witnessing right now. They're putting the stepping stones into place in order to clamp down on communication that's freely put out during an emergency, right? So you can kind of see this happening in places like Europe right now. But I do not doubt for a second that if things maintain the current course, we will see a push, whether or not it's in Congress or whether or not it's through executive order or who knows what else, to be able to censor social media in certain ways during a national disaster or national emergency because it's dangerous, right? And this is what we're seeing being spread by the mainstream and the White House right this second. And just so you're aware, if you were to search Hurricane Helene relief issues or, problems with relief or anything along those lines, you will get article after article after article from mainstream sources about how it's the misinformation that you need to be worried about, not the lack of disaster relief, which is very telling in my opinion. Pattern recognition is important, and you should recognize patterns, and that's what we're doing tonight. And then also we are going to discuss how today is October 7th, and it's been 1 year since the attack on Israel by Hamas, and there are just a couple of things to consider based on recent updates in that arena, just to kind of see where we are regarding how close that entire situation is to growing catabolically, right? So let's get here to Hurricane Milton first, because it's not something we have a lot to discuss on based on the fact that it hasn't happened quite yet in the sense of creating a disaster scenario, but it is something that you need to be prepared for, especially if you're in Florida. And there are some things that I want to tell you about here that you might not be aware of, especially regarding what the governor of Florida recently did in order to avoid some of the similar situations we've seen in other disaster recovery zones, okay? Where will Hurricane Milton make landfall? North or south of Tampa, Florida makes huge difference on storm surge threat, okay? The National Hurricane Center said models are in disagreement on where Milton will make landfall. The official NHC track forecast at 11 a.m. shifted landfall farther north on Florida's west coast, but there are some models showing a more southerly track. AccuWeather is predicting landfall as a Category 3 storm around Longboat Key, north of Sarasota, around 8 p.m. Wednesday, said AccuWeather lead hurricane expert Alex Da Silva in a telephone interview early Monday afternoon. It'll stay a Category 5 storm until Tuesday morning and then undergo an eye wall replacement, which is normal with powerful hurricanes. That will temporarily reduce winds but will increase the size. It will probably intensify again, but that's hard to predict. Now, they're basically saying that even if it hits as a Category 3, it's going to have the same amount of storm surge as a Category 4, and that's exactly what we saw back with Hurricane Katrina. So there's a lot of concern here, okay? And let's see here. Even if, it makes landfall as a Category 3 storm, don't expect the storm surge impact to lessen. Then he says exactly what I just told you. At this time, the worst storm surge is expected in the Bradenton and Sarasota area, where it could reach a historic 15 to 20 feet, according to AccuWeather. Now, just so you all are aware, I was born in Bradenton. I was raised in Sarasota. So to any friends or family that I have in that area, please be safe. Please evacuate. Please do what you need to do to save yourselves. Always prioritize preservation of life over anything else. You shouldn't worry about possessions or material things or anything along those lines. You have to prioritize your life, and then everything else comes after. And in this case, based on the size and the power of this storm currently, clearly an evacuation may be in order, okay? So, just wanted to mention that because this place where the storm is heading is near and dear to my heart. A storm surge of 10 to 15 feet is expected between Tampa and Fort Myers. If landfall is just north of Sarasota, storm surge could be 15 to 20 feet. A landfall north of Tampa will push water into Tampa Bay in a worst-case scenario. So, be aware of that. If you're in that region, you need to be very careful and you need to make very good decisions within the next 24 hours. So, another thing to keep in mind is that evacuation orders have already been given in that area. Hurricane Milton evacuation orders grow as storm reaches Category 5. A Category 5 is no joke. This is a big, powerful storm. Yes, it's supposed to weaken. We can't guarantee that will happen. So that is something that everyone in that area should be considering. Don't look at this as weakening being a reason for why you don't need to take it so seriously. Even a Category 3 is extremely devastating, as shown by Hurricane Helene. So please take this seriously. Florida officials are urging residents to evacuate now as Hurricane Milton intensifies and sets its sights on the state's west coast. Hours before the storm strengthened into a Category 5 hurricane on Monday, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis warned residents to take evacuation orders seriously. Time is going to start running out very, very soon, he said at a news conference. Please, if you're in the Tampa Bay area, you need to evacuate. Kevin Guthrie, Executive Director of Florida Emergency Management, urged at the news conference. Drowning deaths due to storm surge are 100% preventable if you leave. So, please keep that in mind. People stay behind for a myriad of reasons. People don't want to get caught in the traffic or without gas or anything along those lines. And they're worried about looters and things of that nature. I completely understand that. But this is one of those things where you don't want to have hindsight telling you should have done something differently. The other thing I want to bring up, which is very interesting here, okay, and I think this is a very important thing for everyone to be aware of. The governor of Florida recently signed some executive orders for disaster response scenarios in anticipation of Hurricane Milton. And this is very interesting to me because you should be paying attention to these types of actions being taken right now. This is what most people would expect from their government, but they didn't think we had to ask or say it beforehand, right? We didn't know this was going to be a prerequisite to a disaster, but this is what the governor recently put into law, which I find to be extremely beneficial and something that you should be thinking about when it comes to who it is you would like to see running your state or anything related to emergency management. So, we just had a little trickle of power there, I guess. Memorandum, Executive Order number 24-214, Emergency Management Tropical Storm Milton. Okay, this was signed just a few days ago, or 2 days ago on October 5th. Today, Governor Ron DeSantis issued Executive Order 24-214, Emergency Management Tropical Storm Milton, declaring a state of emergency in 35 Florida counties. Now, here's the parts that you should find very interesting, that I find to be extremely beneficial for the residents of Florida, and I think more states should adopt these types of rules post-disaster. Language in the opening portion of Section 2, which prohibits the suspension of or limitation of the sale, dispensation, or transportation of firearms. Back when Hurricane Helene hit Florida, there was a police chief in a city there that decided he was going to ban firearms somehow arbitrarily because I guess after a disaster, that's not an okay time to defend yourself. So they tried to ban having a firearm, possessing a firearm, selling firearms, buying firearms, anything related to ammunition, and all of those things. And this was the governor's response to that, letting everyone know in the state that if they try that again, it's going to be a problem. I find this to be extremely interesting based on what we've seen happen in the past, especially with Hurricane Katrina, where they went around trying to confiscate firearms from people. So this is good, and this is in direct response to what that police chief tried to do. And state law in Florida overrides local municipalities, so they can't go past this now, and this is a warning to those police chiefs out there who think they're going to go ahead and run with some sort of anti-2A rule after a disaster. So first off, that's very important. Now, here's another interesting one that I also found to be based on what we've seen in other disaster zones here in the country. Section 2, subsection H, which directs all state, regional, and local governmental agencies, including law enforcement agencies, to allow Floridians to return to their properties when it is reasonably safe to do so after the storm. There are many disaster zones, even to this day, where people are still not allowed to get back to their property. So this is putting something into place that's going to say, look, if they're not letting you back in your property, but it's not unsafe and it's reasonable to do so at that time, the government of Florida has now decided that you have a case, right? And this is something that I find to be extremely interesting. And then this just goes to show you how close in proximity this storm is to Hurricane Helene, because they're still cleaning up from Helene in anticipation for this Category 5 monster. Section 13, which orders all disaster debris management sites and landfills in all counties impacted by Hurricane Helene to remain open and allow 24-hour debris drop-off. This is part of the state of Florida's effort to ensure as much debris from Helene is cleaned up and disposed of ahead of the coming storm. Because it's blocking evacuation routes, it's making logistics more difficult, and it's something that they're just trying to get a handle on before this other storm impacts the state. So I found all this extremely interesting because it's logical steps towards what a disaster should look like, in the sense of not allowing these authoritarians to come in and disarm everybody, and for not stopping people from getting back to their property once it's reasonably safe to do so, and for making sure that people have the capacity to get rid of as much debris before the storm hits. So this I found to be beneficial, positive in many ways. And I think that if you're in Florida right now, you have probably better decisions being made on your behalf than maybe some other states would have made, right? We all know that there are plenty of other states out there that would have no problem with the idea of police chiefs trying to tell you you can't exercise your Second Amendment rights post a disaster, which is the time you actually need them the most, right? A lot of these boots on the ground who go and do all this disaster relief and are helping Hurricane Helene victims right now carry weapons because it's dangerous. There's looters, people are at very high tension levels, there's a lot of desperation, and things can get dicey very quickly. So they go armed because it's not safe. But for some reason, your local government and authority decides that you shouldn't be able to defend yourself in the most unsafe environment you've been in your entire life. So I guess Florida is doing something correct, at least in my opinion. And I found all those things to be logical steps towards the right idea, based on historical precedent that they've learned from other disaster zones that this is important to do. So let's go ahead and talk about Hurricane Helene. Now, the reason I want to address this tonight, first off, there's great people on the ground. There's people that are part of this community who are giving us information directly via social media and different accounts, right? And one of the things that is brought up time and time again is that there is a media blackout about the lack of federal response and the need for additional resources because it makes certain people look bad right before an election. And I don't doubt that for a second. So I feel obligated to ensure people are made aware of what's happening there and what is being used right now as leverage. This situation right now is the exact definition of never let a crisis go to waste. And the reason I'm saying that is because the thing they're trying to get out of this Hurricane Helene scenario is the ability to censor people like myself in the future during any type of disaster scenario. And of course, we know a national emergency can be declared for any real reason, right? We saw what happened during 2020. We know that lots of national emergencies have been declared throughout all the presidencies of our past, right? And they want the ability to shut me up and shut anyone up who they don't agree with or don't like the message that they're spreading. And this is what they're doing right now. They are setting up the stage to be able to push this on us and get it through the House or get it through executive order, or however they want to try to get it. And you can see it clear as day. But you might not be looking at it that way right now if you weren't putting together 17 different news articles that all say the exact same thing. And that's very concerning for me because I see where this is going. They can't save face right now. They can't turn around and say, look, we're doing a great job. They can't sell anything about this response as being positive. So their only option at this point in time is to try to basically twist everything into how they need to fix things in the future in order to avoid these types of scenarios from happening again. And it has nothing to do with disaster response. It has everything to do with their ability to control the narrative. So here's where we will go. Osmond Holistic says, how will they vote if they have no voter stations, addresses, or ID cards? I know they are asking for things like buses and vans and any large-scale transportation possibilities to be brought into the disaster zone to get people on these buses and vans and everything else and hopefully take them to polling stations so that they can feel like they still have their right to vote and they still are part of the system in some form or capacity. So I know that's a push that's happening there right now. I don't know of any other better way to do it, in all honesty, but that is something that I know that they're asking for. So that is at least some sort of a solution, I guess. Now, here we go. We're going to get started with how they're using this, where the leverage is coming from, and how it's going to be used against you, okay? So here we have CBS News. Misinformation has surged following Hurricane Helene. Here's a fact check. Here we go. Please hold on to your butts, all right? As recovery efforts from Hurricane Helene continue across the southeastern U.S., federal and state officials have warned that misinformation and conspiracy theories are hindering efforts to provide aid and accurate information to victims. You know what would actually prevent misinformation and conspiracy theories from happening in these areas? A proper and massive response where people feel that they're actually being taken care of and where you can't film anything without seeing someone related to the federal government lending aid. At that point in time, people would say, well, they're really here and they're really doing it. But for some reason, according to every mainstream media outlet right now, the people on the ground are telling us lies and we're supposed to believe them because they're, saying that things are actually happening. This is why we're talking about this right now. And then I'm going to show you the alternative of all this, where all of this is basically being proven false by other mainstream outlets. And I think you can develop your own theory as to why this is happening by that point. The American Red Cross said misinformation is hurting relief efforts, while Deanne Criswell, who leads the Federal Emergency Management Agency, said the false claims are demoralizing to aid workers. Republican Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina told Face the Nation on Sunday that the claims distract from rescue work. On Monday, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre called out scam artists and bad faith actors, and others who are putting politics over people are promoting misinformation about our efforts, including falsehoods about federal assistance. Just to reiterate that really quickly here, how does this distract from the work of the relief? Who cares what people are saying, right? Why would this matter? It's causing us issues. It's creating roadblocks. In what way? I should be able to say whatever I want about anything, and it shouldn't change anything about the planning and the relief effort of a massive government bureaucracy. They're supposed to have all these things figured out. Why would what I say about them doing their job or not doing their job matter at all to them? But apparently it does, which is where all this censorship is going to come from here moving forward, I promise you. Misinformation often surges following major weather disasters, but with Hurricane Helene hitting several battleground states just weeks before a tightly contested election, the spread of false claims has accelerated. Why would that matter? Why does any of this matter? Former President Donald Trump doubled down on his misleading statements about federal disaster relief on Monday, falsely alleging that the Biden administration has allocated almost all of the FEMA money to illegal migrants. At a Pennsylvania rally on Sunday, Trump falsely suggested that storm victims were only being offered $750 in aid. All right, now here's where it gets fun. Watch how this works. Here's your fact checks. Claim federal aid is being diverted to support immigrants. A widely circulated claim falsely asserts that FEMA has run out of money because it diverted disaster relief funds to support undocumented immigrants. Okay? Trump talked about it, this or that, blah, blah, blah. Okay? These claims are false. FEMA has said it has funds for immediate response and recovery efforts from Hurricane Helene, but it may face a funding shortfall as more storms emerge this season. Like Milton, possibly. The agency has said that no money is being diverted from disaster response needs. Critics of the Biden-Harris administration have pointed to one FEMA initiative, the Shelter and Services Program, which gives grants to groups to provide shelter and other services to migrants. Its funding for the 2024 fiscal year, which was approved by Congress, was $650 million, a small fraction of FEMA's budget. I don't care. I don't care. $650 million for that project is the problem. People don't care that it was specifically sent to a certain fund or a certain location. People care that this is $650 million being spent on people who are technically not Americans, and instead not being spent on the people who need it the most right now. This is like saying, look, the money for Hurricane Helene is in my checking account, but the money we used for the migrants is in my savings account. So they're different, okay? They're not the same thing. Even though I'm the one who owns both accounts and have access to them, look, Congress said I could only use it for this or that, right? So like this is why people don't care that this was supposed to be used for a certain thing. They care about the fact that $650 million went to things that nobody necessarily want right now. What they want right now is to be helping Americans, okay? Now it goes through all that. So they're not trying to deny that this is what's happening. They're just saying that the funds are different. So the fact is false, but the truth is that they have only, I think, sent $200 million to Hurricane Helene so far and $650 million to taking care of migrants that are being put up in hotel rooms. That's why people are mad, but hey, I guess it's a false claim. Now, storm victims will receive only $750. At a campaign rally in Pennsylvania on Saturday, Trump suggested that those who lost their homes in the hurricane were only being offered $750 in federal aid. The claim is misleading. The $750 is referenced as part of FEMA's Serious Needs Assistance Program, which is designed to provide immediate relief for essential supplies, like food, water, and medication. The program is one part of a larger package of aid available to those affected by the storm. Look, the whole thing here is that people have to go through a ridiculous application process using the internet in a lot of places where people don't have power or the internet, and then they get denied if they make a certain amount of money or if they don't necessarily meet the criteria. Why is that when it's only $750? I don't know. I feel like if you're in the area and you're displaced, you get the money because it's not even any real money. It's barely anything in all honesty. But instead, what I've seen, and I can't verify some of this stuff because I just didn't have a chance to go back and look at all this, but I've even seen people saying things along the lines like $35,000 was the maximum income level you could have in order to receive the $750 from FEMA for this, right? So like this is for people who are supposedly in poverty and things of that nature, not necessarily for everyone who is affected. And then of course the application process is hard to access. And then all the other money is supposed to be able to get, applied for further down the road. Right? Well, how long do they think $750 is going to last? FEMA says federal assistance for survivors has surpassed $210 million. It's So like I said, why are people mad? Because $650 million has been spent on putting people in hotel rooms that aren't from this country, but $210 million has been spent on Hurricane Helene victims. President Biden, not to mention all the foreign aid, but that's a whole different story. President Biden previously announced that the federal government would cover 100% of costs for debris removal and emergency protective measures in North Carolina for 6 months. FEMA also debunked online claims that the $750 was a loan, and then failure to repay it would result in people's property being seized. And look, there is a lot of stuff that's being blown out of proportion and exaggerated, don't get me wrong. But all of their arguments for why these claims are false aren't real arguments. It's saying that, well, it's true, but just not in the way that everyone's trying to say, right? And the fact is, people aren't saying that it's not true, that this is like how it works. What they're saying is that it's not enough. And that the whole response isn't enough. And that the fact that all this other money is being spent in all these other places is problematic when we're not willing to spend the same or more money on things we actually need when it comes to helping Americans. So volunteers and donations are being blocked, and then it's saying, things are being reorganized in some different places. And some of that's true, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, it's more evidence that these particular organizations aren't qualified to manage logistics on this scale. That's the real problem here. Are things being taken and sent to the wrong place, or taken at all? I can't guarantee you that. But what I can say is that, yeah, in some cases, they're going to take stuff from one place and move it to another when it makes logistical sense. The problem is that they can't organize logistics in a fashion that makes it efficient. So they take things to move them somewhere else, but they don't get to that somewhere else for a long period of time. And by the time they do get there, things have changed and moved into a different direction. So it is a problem, and it is very possible that it's happening exactly like we're being told. But I can also understand the other side of it, from it being just a logistical nightmare because of mismanagement and the inability and incompetence of these organizations, right? And then this one is interesting too. I'm sure you guys will like this one because I liked it anyway. Government is withholding aid to Republican areas. Trump floated a claim early in the recovery efforts that aid was not reaching Republican areas in North Carolina, posting on Monday on Truth Social, right? And saying that, they're avoiding Republican areas and all this stuff, okay? This is what I find funny. FEMA has strongly refuted this claim on its site, saying it provides assistance to survivors regardless of race, color, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, religion, age, disability, English proficiency, or economic status. Weirdly enough, they left out political ideology, I guess. So, not saying that they do actually discriminate based on that, but what I'm saying is it's funny to refute the claim and then not actually provide the evidence that that's true, right? To not even mention it in the thing that everybody's mad about. So whatever, I just find it interesting. But regardless, Western North Carolina has become a focus of misinformation, including claims that aid efforts are being blocked. The area is represented by a Republican in Congress, but Asheville is represented by a Democrat in the state assembly. Why am I talking about this way? Because they are setting up the necessary stepping stones to implement mass censorship during an emergency situation. They are going to use this against us in the future anytime there is a disaster. You will see this. They're literally building the case right now against us in order to show that we need to be censored during these times of crisis, right? Now, here's one thing I find interesting, okay? I am wondering if we are getting ads on this live stream because people suddenly disappeared. Over 100 people suddenly dipped out. Usually not something that's that sudden, but maybe there's ads running and I have ads turned off. So if there are ads running, I apologize because they're not supposed to be on until the replay. So replay crew, I'm sorry, you probably have some ads going, but while we're live, I don't want them on because we don't need to be distracted. So let me know if that's happening because it's an issue. Lefty, please call out any organization that you know of that are the best ways to donate for this assistance effort. Thanks, brother. Lefty, for me, it is literally Grindstone Ministries is the one I know best. We're going to talk about them later tonight because there's a couple things going on regarding what they're doing on the ground. But I will go ahead and just put that in the live chat right now. It's also in the description if you want to donate to them. They're actually doing things, and they're actually providing us with intel, which is why I know a lot of what's happening right now is BS, and why I think we're witnessing this mass censorship push because of what's going on. So, no ads, everyone says. Well, that's good. That's good. Not sure why we're having weird dips, but people are saying trolls and bots, and that might be the truth as well. Now, here's what the White House is saying. And this is like I'm building the case for you right now to see that this is what they'll use against us anytime there's a major disaster in the future, especially if we're talking about like SHTF, right? This is it. They're starting the process, okay? And they're using Helene to do it because they can't let a crisis go to waste, and they can't salvage their response to this crisis. So the only thing they can do is use it to their benefit for future situations. Interested parties memo, fighting Hurricane Helene falsehoods with facts. Okay, they're going to talk about a bunch of stuff, and then they go into, unfortunately, as our response and recovery efforts continue, we have seen a large increase in false information circulating online related to the federal response to Hurricane Helene. A number of scam artists, bad faith actors, and others who want to sow chaos because they think it helps their political interests are promoting disinformation about the recovery effort, including ways to access critical and life-saving resources. This is wrong, dangerous, and it must stop immediately. Okay, listen. People are hurting on the ground there right now. They've lost everything. They aren't thinking about any of this. They're just telling it how it is, and they're asking for help. But the problem is people like us who are talking about the fact that they're not maybe getting the help that they deserve. This is wrong, dangerous, and it must stop immediately. Combating misinformation and disinformation is always important, by the way, in case you weren't aware. But it is especially important when responding to disasters like Hurricane Helene. This is from the White House. This is why I'm telling you about this. This is what they are worried about more than actually doing a better job. Imagine this. Imagine if they came out and said, you know what? We aren't happy with the level of response currently going on right now. We've seen it with our own eyes, and we're aware that there are some issues that we need to resolve. We're going to put more funding into it. We're going to deploy more boots on the ground, and we're going to do what we can to improve the scenario. If they said that, people would be like, okay, like I'll wait till I see it to believe it, but at the same time, at least they're going to try, I guess, right? Instead, they're just worried about this, which is exactly telling you what it is that's going to happen next, right? Okay. In fact, disinformation after a hurricane or other natural disaster can discourage people from seeking critical assistance when they need it most. It is imperative that we encourage impacted residents to register for FEMA assistance, not discourage it by allowing falsehoods to spread. Do you think the people with no power and no internet even know that you're doing this right now or saying this or anything? Do you think they are listening to me? Do you think they're listening to a bunch of other people? No, they're literally just worried about what they're dealing with. They're only worried about how they're going to survive to the next day. They want more help. That's it. And the stuff they're putting out online for us to see is just their honest reaction to what's happening. But this is what we're being told by the White House. Leaders from across the country, including local, state, and federal elected officials in both parties, are pleading with people to stop sharing this junk. And then here's what they reference. CNN, Huffington Post, The Hill, and WVLT, right, which is like a local media outlet. Wow, who would have thought that the mainstream media would be on your side? Here are some of the falsehoods spreading online. Then they go through the whole thing. No money's being diverted. FEMA's disaster response efforts and individual assistance is funded through the Disaster Relief Fund, which is a dedicated fund for disaster efforts. Disaster Relief Fund money has not been diverted to other non-disaster related efforts. But they don't mention the fact that they have a second fund that has funded migrants living in hotel rooms for $650 million. That's what people are mad about. They're not mad about the fact that there's two different funds and one has money and the other one doesn't. They're just mad about where the money's going because these are taxpayers, American citizens who've been displaced, lost everything, and aren't getting what they would have hoped they would have received from their government, okay? And like we all know here in the preparedness community, we don't want to have to rely on the government. We don't need the government most of the time. But in dire situations, in large-scale disasters, what else is the function of government? And if they don't have a function, then why do they exist, right? So this is why we're talking about this. Now, FEMA will only provide $750. So they're going through all the same stuff. Here's one I find very interesting, right? FEMA and the FAA are restricting airspace in North Carolina, preventing private citizens from delivery relief. There are no airspace restrictions in place in North Carolina as rescue efforts continue because of Hurricane Helene. Pilots looking to come into Asheville or Rutherford airports need to reach out to the airport for permission to land. The FAA is working with local authorities to ensure rescue efforts happen safely. That doesn't actually discredit the claim that they're restricting airspace. It just says that you have to ask for their permission to land, and if they don't give it to you, I guess you don't land, which in many cases is restricting airspace. So I don't, like it's crazy. This is crazy, right? And here's another thing I want you to think about. They're trying to kind of spin this whole situation too. Days before this storm hit, I directed my administration to pre-position federal personnel, critical supplies, and more near the storm's path. We're moving heaven and earth to make sure that everyone affected by this storm gets what they need. The thing is that no one expected eastern Tennessee and western North Carolina to get utterly destroyed by a hurricane that hit Florida first, right? Hurricanes generally make the mass amount of their damage upon landfall, and then they slowly deteriorate the further inland they go. But because of aging and non-well-maintained infrastructure and a litany of other things like a drought and over-inundated soil in some places and everything else, it all came together for the perfect storm, which created a mass catastrophe. They weren't ready for this. It's fine to say that they weren't ready for it because they weren't planning on it actually doing what it did. But at the same time, to use that as an excuse, like, well, we were ready for it. No one had a clue that that was going to happen the way that it did. Not even the government. So, look, I'm just going to demonstrate one more little piece of this just so everybody can see where this is all going, right? So now we're at NPR, same deal. Helene recovery is more political online than on the ground, okay? Now, this article is hilarious because it literally contradicts itself in its own article. Batshit crazy, thanks for the super sticker, by the way. Much appreciated. Everyone, I know I'm not jumping in the chat a lot right now because we got a lot to go over, but I really do appreciate you all 100%. And this is an excellent community to be part of. 100%. I really appreciate everything going on here. Hey, Eli Corona, how's it going? I saw you in the chat. I just wanted to say hi. Rob Sinelli's here too. Excellent. So check this out. They're talking about the same thing here in this article, but there's contradictory evidence of what we're talking about them trying to twist in this same article, which just goes to show you that they're all full of it, okay? It's election season, so maybe it's no surprise that the federal response to damage in Hurricane Helene's wake is a hot topic, especially on social media. However, some of the conspiracies, misinformation, and rumors that circulate are extraordinary. Enough so that the Federal Emergency Management Agency is addressing them directly. Why? Why are they addressing them directly? They need to be focused on actually helping the people who need help. Why do they even care what people say on social media? Could you imagine the military about to engage in a military operation, and then people on social media are like, oh, please don't bomb that airfield. I really don't want you to do that. And the military going, oh man, they're telling us not to do that thing. We really need to address that because they're mistaken actually about why that airfield's a good target. So let's make sure they know why we're going to bomb the airfield before we do it. So they're we're not spreading misinformation. That's just not how things work. It should not matter to FEMA at all that people are saying things that they don't agree with. Like, that is not their focus and should not be even something they're thinking about. Which is why this is more than just them retorting this misinformation. It's not dangerous in the way they're trying to say. They're calling it dangerous because they want it to be dangerous for their future plans. Okay? No, FEMA can't seize your land if it's deemed unlivable, and the agency says rumors it's confiscating private donations are false. On the ground in western North Carolina and eastern Tennessee, NPR reporters are hearing echoes of this misinformation. From who? People who live there and have lost everything? I wonder why they're telling you this. But they've also found less politicization and a more nuanced view of the federal response, especially in communities that have been without internet access since Helene raged through the region. So people without internet have a little bit of a different opinion. That's crazy. I can't believe that. Elon Musk's social media platform X has been an especially fertile place for politically charged rumors and conspiracies. Sometimes they have been fueled by the billionaire himself. We are going to talk about that here in just a second. On Friday, Musk fed into a common complaint online that governments are preventing private citizens from offering help to people in need. Musk wrote that his blood is boiling after engineers from his company SpaceX tried to offer help via helicopter, but FEMA wouldn't let them land to deliver critical supplies. Okay? Actually, the Federal Aviation Administration regulates airspace, and the FAA said in a statement that following Helene, the skies have been crowded and it's trying to maintain safety. A federal official confirmed to NPR there have been more than 30 cases where two aircraft almost collided as air traffic in the region increased 300% after the storm. There are no restrictions to aerial recovery operations. We'll get back to that here in just a minute. I want you to keep that in mind, though, as we move forward, because so they're kind of contradicting themselves right there. But here's what's more fun, okay? And this, it goes into talking about the lithium mines and all that other stuff. Look, here's one, I'll say, okay, let me say one thing about that, okay? And this is solely my opinion and just kind of speculation, let's call it. The lithium mine thing, here's what they're saying. Perhaps no area in North Carolina has been the subject of more blatant false online rumors than Chimney Rock, including the persistent, untrue claim that FEMA abandoned the village so that Biden administration can mine lithium there. The way that they're trying to say that that's false is by including the Biden administration or the government as part of that operation, right? Now, I'm not saying that this is what's happening, but if this was something that was, let's just say, considered for some reason, right? It wouldn't be the government who would be taking over these properties. Corporations, though, would be more than willing to buy up completely destroyed property from people who lost everything for pennies on the dollar in order to get to what it may or may not have underneath. I'm not saying that's what's happening, but their way they're trying to say that this is false is by saying the government isn't going to do that and the government can't do that. But that doesn't mean that mega corporations aren't going to try to do that. And one of the biggest things in this fifth generation warfare that we're all currently living under is that, you know, the whole you'll own nothing and you'll be happy deal. Well, that's because their goal is to sow chaos and destroy our society as a whole when it comes to standards so that everything becomes really cheap because it's all crap and they can buy it all up on the cheap and then sell it back to you for a lot more money. So just be aware of that. I'm not saying that's what's happening there, but it is interesting that they brought it up and that the only reason they say that it's untrue is because the government itself can't be behind it. Okay, now here's where the contradictory stuff comes into play because I find it hilarious that they would put this in the article when the article is trying to tell you that all this misinformation is happening and that FEMA is doing everything that they can in their power and that the federal government's there in droves helping everybody out. And in this article, someone says that's not true. So here we go. I'm going to go to it right now for you, okay? All right, so we have, first off, people talking about how there's no internet, so they're not really sure what's going on, right? But check this out. Okay. 1.5 miles down the road, a local bar has become a collection and distribution center for donations and a source of hot meals for those helping locals recover. It's also where neighbors can catch up and share news, not all of it true. Just so you remember, it's not true. There is no organization. It's called community, says Tabitha Swinehart, who has lived here for 30 years. Asked about the federal government's response to storm damage, she says, honestly, I don't know what you're talking about. There has been none. We haven't seen any federal response. FEMA says nearly 7,000 federal employees have been deployed across the region. Swinehart then packs hot meals onto a blue four-wheeled utility vehicle and speeds away to deliver them up mountain roads that are no longer accessible by car. What? I'm sorry, I'm just flabbergasted. So in this article about how all of this is misinformation, they interview someone who's there actually volunteering and providing people with meals that can't get them otherwise. And this person literally says, what do you mean federal government? No one's here. And then they just go to say, well, there are 7,000 people though. And by the way, not all of the news is true, right? So you tell me if this person who's doing the best they can to help others is just lying, right? They're just spreading misinformation. Or if you think they honestly haven't seen any federal response. And that's why they're doing the things that they're doing. Right? Like, this is insanity. Like, like in their own article, they contradict themselves and then expect us to not question any of this, I guess. Right? So, let's go ahead and talk about the little Elon Musk situation that we referenced there for a second. Because they're trying to say that this whole interaction is misinformation as well. But to me, it just looks like what they're being told from people who are there. So I don't know how else to interpret these things. How am I supposed to know that the person who's there is telling me something that's not true, but the news people who aren't there are telling me something true? How does this work, right? I'm not sure if the government or anyone over there understands how social media actually works. But Elon Musk slams FEMA over Helene response in North Carolina as SpaceX looks to set up new Starlinks. Okay? Elon Musk on Friday slammed the Federal Emergency Agency, claiming that it's blocking shipments of Starlink satellite internet deliveries in hurricane-ravaged North Carolina. FEMA is not merely failing to adequately help people in trouble, but is actively blocking citizens who try to help, the billionaire claimed on X. Musk said he had just received a note from a SpaceX engineer, Starlink's parent company, in Asheville, North Carolina, who said the company has powered up 2 large operating bases for choppers to deliver goods into hands. We've deployed 300 plus Starlinks, and outpour is it has saved many lives. But Musk said the engineer claimed that FEMA is actively blocking shipments and seizing goods and services locally and locking them away to state they are their own. It's very real and scary how much they have taken control to stop people helping. We are blocked now on the shipments of new Starlinks coming in until we get an escort from the fire department, but that may not be enough. Later Friday, Musk said that the problem was resolved, crediting Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, who suddenly realized that they were looking really, really bad to everyone on the entire internet. He later shared a text exchange with the engineer in which he claimed that FEMA was about to shut down the airspace to regulate the private choppers we are riding in to deliver Starlink and supplies. We're pushing back with the Trump team as well to help us, but it's not looking good. So let's look at that tweet so you can see the whole message. And according to mainstream media all over, like I said, go ahead and search right now. Hurricane Helene relief issues or problems or relief supplies not getting where they need to go or something along those lines, right? And you're going to find article after article after article about misinformation and how dangerous it is for this relief effort, okay? But this is coming from Elon Musk, which you can have whatever opinion you want on this person. In my opinion, you can think however they want, right? Like it's whatever. But this is a text message from their engineer who's on the ground. So I feel like there's at least some validity here. Regardless, just received this text 20 minutes ago. The level of belligerent government incompetence is staggering. Keep in mind, that previous article said, well, Elon Musk said FEMA's blocking airspace, but that's actually the FAA, right? Okay, now let's read this together. What the F? FEMA is both incompetent and stopping people from helping. How can I help? It's true. They are now about to shut down the airspace to regulate the private choppers we are riding in to deliver Starlink and supplies. We are pushing back with Trump team as well to help us, but not looking good. We need help to get word out about FEMA, which is what I'm trying to do here. This is what I've been asked to do by other people in the community. If I had a platform, can I please try to keep getting the message out? So this is what I'm trying to do because I feel obligated to do so because it's important, right? We need help to get the word out about FEMA. We spoke with Ivanka and handed out Starlinks with her yesterday, but FEMA then showed up and started blocking us. The largest concern for us here is the FAA. Oh, wow, they realized it's the FAA and not just FEMA. I wonder if that changes anything about that fact check. The FAA throttling flights for our choppers, where they're requiring to-from information and mission now to deliver a discrete code. Doing this takes a long time and is very cumbersome to the ops. This is the largest concern and most help we could use, but I appreciate whatever else it says after that. So that's just coming from people who are there actually doing it, who are actually trying to help. I'm not making this up, but apparently they are, according to mainstream media and the federal government and the White House. I showed the White House is saying that it's all junk. It's junk. Okay. Wow. Sorry, I'm a little fired up about this, but it's ridiculous. And to have NPR write a whole article about it and then just be like, oh yeah, and this lady said there is no federal response. But what does she know? Like she's the person we interviewed here who's there right now doing stuff. But still, just be aware that not all the news they share is true. Right? So then I decided to say, hey, well, what else is going on here? Because just recently we had James Comer, okay, Republican from Kentucky, investigating why the FCC decided to revoke Starlink funds. Starlink was awarded subsidies, basically, to distribute their devices throughout the rural areas of the country. And that was in 2020, and then in 2022, it was taken away. The FCC said, never mind, we're not going to do that for you anymore. And of course, people speculate that this is lawfare and that this is, discriminatory based on who owns SpaceX. But the problem is that now with these recovery efforts, we're seeing that, man, if this would have been available to more people based on the fact that it did get awarded this government subsidy, that maybe more people would have access to information and communications right now than they do, right? So Comer is there trying to investigate this now, and basically investigating the Federal Communications Commission's decision to revoke an award authorizing Space Exploration Technologies Corporation's Starlink to receive $885.5 million in broadband deployment subsidies through the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. In a letter to the FCC chairwoman, Jessica Rosenworcel, Chairman Comer is requesting documents and communications related to the FCC's initial decision to award Starlink broadband deployment subsidies and subsequent decision to deny the award to Starlink. I think we all know why this is happening. And now that I connect the dots, it's not just because they don't like Elon Musk or they don't like, the people involved with that company. It's because they don't want everyone to have communication during a disaster. They don't want people to be able to put videos out about what's really going on the ground. They don't want people to actually show you whether or not they're getting the aid that they need. They need to stop that from being able to happen, because then more people wake up to the fact that the federal government is not actually there to help you and will not help you in your time of need. And that's one of the only good things, or really the only good thing that came out of this catastrophe, is the amount of Americans who suddenly realized, wait a second, this is not how things should work. Why are we sending billions of dollars in foreign aid to these countries right now while Americans are suffering and not getting the help they need? Why is all this happening? And that thought process is starting to permeate throughout the population. And people from all different walks of life, city folks, country folks, Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives, everybody is starting to say, well, this doesn't seem quite right. And that is hugely dangerous to the government right now, because they do not need the American people to say, hold on, what's going on here, all collectively, right? They need us divided because, it's easier for them to conquer in that sense. But right now, they're freaking out about the fact that people are at least in one way or another coming together on this particular issue. Now, of course, if you want to look for the idiots in the crowd, you'll find a million people on X who will tell you that, anything that's not from the mainstream's speaking mouthpieces is misinformation. Even if you're literally someone who's in North Carolina right now, standing in the middle of rubble and debris, saying, hey man, no one's helping me and I got nothing, people will literally go on and be like, this guy staged this, or this is a lie, it's a myth, right? And those people, I'm sorry, but at this point in time, basically a lost cause, right? Sorry, but if that's how you're going to be, I don't know what else to tell you at this point. Now, we also do know that this does expose a deep betrayal of America. This is a Zero Hedge article I found interesting. But the thing is that this is true. This has exposed the government and how they actually feel about the average American citizen compared to what they're willing to do for people in other countries or from other countries. And it's completely backwards and wrong, okay? Now, one thing I found interesting here, and look, all this evidence of things that are happening the exact way that we're being told, but then, every other media outlet's like, no, it's not like that. So I found this little tidbit from Tim Kennedy actually kind of interesting. So I thought that this would give you guys some ideas here, because Tim Kennedy, he's been around. He's kind of a controversial guy. Maybe not the most pro 2A figure that's ever existed. Things of that nature have come around. We don't need to dig all that up. But I do find what he says here to be very interesting. And guess what? He's there on the ground helping out. So I can't criticize the dude on any of that when I'm not there helping out on the ground. So keep that in mind. But check this out. However, in one case where FEMA and National Guardsmen are found, they are getting in the way. As told to Fox News on October 2nd, 2024 by Tim Kennedy, a relief volunteer who had gathered survivors in his ongoing efforts to find them shelter. He explained how he and those survivors were turned away from one hotel after being told it was completely booked by federal employees. These employees have the weight of the government behind them and don't need to worry about how their next meal is going to be found. If anything, they should be sleeping in tents and eating MREs, known as C rations in my day. And I agree. Why are they in a hotel if they don't have room for the people who actually need it, right? These federal employees are going to be taken care of throughout the process. The people who need that board and that lodging are the ones who aren't going to have a home to go back to after the fact. And yet, we're making sure that these federal employees are getting the Ritz treatment, right? So, and this one more counterpoint here in the sense of like how all this misinformation stuff is just total crap. Volunteers rescuing NC Helene victims ask where federal government is. No support, no leadership. Why are they asking that if this is not how things are actually on the ground? Let's just go over here real quick, okay? Florida Guard Special Missions Unit's John Howard, Aerial Recovery's Charlie Keebaugh, and pilot Mark Roseman and civilian helicopter pilot Zeb Hadley are conducting search and rescue operations in North Carolina as the Biden-Harris administration's leadership remains in question over their response to the catastrophe. There's just a complete failure of weak leadership here in North Carolina, the federal government, and it takes mind-strong leadership in Florida to send us up here, Howard told Bill Hemmer on Friday. If it wasn't for DeSantis sending the State Guard Special Missions Unit up here, this never even would have happened. But there's just no support here. There's no leadership. When we meet these locals on the ground, they're asking like, you're from the State Guard? I'm like, I am from Florida. And they're like, where's North Carolina? They're asking where their leadership is, he continued. They have no understanding of what's going on. And then we've even had people, officials here, try to kick us out of Lakemore, out of Chimney Rock. Nonsense stuff. They're asking me for my authorizations to be here. It's the most insane thing you would ever see. It's like they want these people to die. This is people that are on the ground doing this stuff. They saved an 11-day-old baby. An 11-year-old baby might be a little strange. An 11-day-old baby makes a lot more sense. So this is misinformation, I guess. This is false, right? So, now, I know I said I was going to talk about some of the Grindstone Ministry stuff. And I did want to share this really quick because I thought it was very interesting. And I thought you guys might appreciate it. But I found them in a little local news article from that region. So I thought you guys would appreciate that. And let's go ahead and just pop that up here. So you can see that even the news admits that these are the guys on the ground doing stuff. And I don't think that they're lying to me about the stuff that's happening there. They have no incentive to lie. They are doing what they can to help others. They're not lying. But the media and the White House says they are. So I can't get on board with that. I can't. Local organizations help supply relief to those affected by Hurricane Helene. This is from WAF 48, which I believe is Alabama news outlet. But check it out. Organizations across the Tennessee Valley are holding supply drives for those affected by Hurricane Helene. One woman told me after she saw videos of the devastation, she knew she needed to help, and that's when she decided to come out here to donate to this supply drive. Sheila Spann brought donations of diapers, baby clothes, water, toys, and school supplies to the Morgan County Sheriff's Office Posse collection site. The Lord has blessed me in so many ways that when I can help somebody out, I try to, said Spann. Mike Swafford from the Sheriff's Office told me the community is really responding to help people suffering in nearby states. In one day, we've already had to start filling the trailer, so the response has been outstanding, said Swafford. The Sheriff's Office Posse is not the only organization collecting donations here in Morgan County. Grindstone Ministries is collecting donations at Frederick Outdoors. Jesse Hockett is a volunteer with the group. He told me they have been hard at work. Grindstone Ministries is on site doing things, helping people, and has been since the day after the disaster, said Hockett. They all add that it feels good to help out. The look on their faces and the gratitude is priceless, Hockey said. I think it's supposed to be Hockett. But when you do something good like this, it does make you feel good, Swafford said. So, I just wanted to bring this up. I'll put it in the live chat, and like I said, it's in the description. If you guys are still trying to help out good organizations who are on the ground doing things, Grindstone Ministries is one of those organizations, and I just shared the donation link in the live chat. It's also in the description, and even the news has to admit that they're there actually helping, right? So I just thought that was cool to find them in a news story and to try to give them some credit for what they're doing down there. And I know they 100% appreciate all of what you guys have done for them. And I also want to mention that Jared from Guns, Gadgets, and the Second Amendment News was over there today and announced that he's donating $30,000 to Grindstone Ministries to help them with the Helene relief efforts. So, look, man, that's huge. It's amazing, and the 2A community coming in to support and do what they can to help, provide whatever it is needed to get these people help is really just uplifting, right? So huge thanks to Jared from Guns, Gadgets, and Second Amendment News over there. He's a pretty solid 2A advocate, obviously, but also clearly somebody who's trying to help where they can. So big thanks to that. Now, we are at 1 year. Mac Bean, Scottish Fitness, good to see you. It's been a minute, and I'm glad you're here. We are at a year since October 7th, okay? The Hamas massacre of Israelis during a music festival, as well as people in their neighborhoods and everything else that happened there. Listen, it's created a huge amount of discourse when it comes to what's happened since the Gaza scenario, everything. It's been just nuts for the last year in that area. So there are a couple updates here I want to give you right now regarding that area because things have gotten strange over there, and I just want you to be aware of it, okay? We had the Iranian missile attack on Israel this past week, okay? Iran's missile attack on Israel, they launched almost 200 ballistic missiles towards Israel on Tuesday night. The Israeli military said most of the missiles were intercepted, but that a small number struck central and southern Israel. The only person reported to have been killed was a Palestinian man in the occupied West Bank. And I'm pretty sure he was hit with a empty fuselage or just container or casing of a missile, because that was a wild thing to see, which it is out there, and it is not something I necessarily needed to see, but that happened, okay? Now, they launched a ton of missiles, directly struck Tel Aviv, Jerusalem. This has not had a response yet. And that to me is insane because today's October 7th. I would have guaranteed somebody there'd be a response by now from Israel, and there hasn't been. So I'm actually more concerned because of how much is going into this, right? Now, we also had this come out. I want to give you guys something to consider here. This is going around, okay? Iran quake sparked speculation of covert nuke test. A 4.5 magnitude seismic event occurred in Iran's Semnan province on the 5th of October 2024, sparking speculation that Iran has tested a nuclear weapon for the first time. Such a seismic event is typically the result of an earthquake, but speculation has arisen on social media suggesting the event was instead an underground nuclear test carried out by the Islamic Republic in response to Israeli threats to bomb Tehran's nuclear energy and oil facilities. I want you to think about this a little more critically. I don't think Iran needs to test a nuclear bomb or even make one. They're best friends with Russia. They've had an arms deal with them ever since the Ukrainian invasion, right? They've been supplying Russia with ballistic missiles and drones and all kinds of stuff. If Iran needs a nuclear weapon, they'll find one, right? They will find one. What's the plot of that movie and that book from Tom Clancy, Some of All Fears, right? Somebody buys a nuclear bomb that was found in some wreckage from a crashed Israeli jet from the 70s, and then they use it in a terror attack later on. Like, if Iran needs a nuclear device, like, they have one. So sure, could it have been a nuclear test? Sure. Is it one? I don't know. Does it matter? Probably not. Because if that's the route they're going to take it one way or the other, and it doesn't really change a thing. So don't get caught up on that kind of stuff. Think it through a little bit further past the initial shock of, nuclear test, and understand that if that becomes a necessity, like, they have access. You have to assume that. Just assume they have a nuclear weapon, or they can at least get one without having to build one, right? Now, another thing to keep in mind is that this Lebanon invasion from Israel has been going on for quite some time. Beirut itself has been bombed quite a bit. And listen, I don't know about you guys, but I definitely have some questions about that gigantic explosion that happened in Beirut. What was that, in 2021? Or was that 2020? Either way, nowadays I'm starting to think about whether or not that had anything to do with anything. You know what I mean? But regardless, here's what happened just today. Okay, Israeli airstrikes killed at least 77 people across Gaza since dawn on Monday, as Hamas's armed wing promised that the group will keep fighting a long war of attrition. Lebanon's Hezbollah says it targeted an Israeli military intelligence unit located in the suburbs of Tel Aviv with missiles, while Yemen's Houthis also claimed firing missiles at 2 military targets in the city. Israel's military continued to bomb the southern suburbs of Beirut and other locations in Lebanon. It also issued evacuation warnings in Lebanon for anyone near the coastline from the Iwali River southwards. At least 4 young Palestinians have been wounded by Israeli live fire during the latest confrontations that broke out at a refugee camp north of Hebron and in Jenin in the occupied West Bank. Okay, Israeli forces have killed nearly 17,000 children in the besieged coastal enclave since October 7th last year, according to the Defense for Children International Palestine. People across the globe are holding marches and rallies in solidarity with Palestine and Lebanon on the first anniversary of Israel's war on Gaza. Keep in mind, this is from Al Jazeera. Clearly, there's a bias here, and they want you to focus on those numbers and on those demonstrations rather than on the fact that this is a hot war that's getting worse and worse every single day. Now, another thing to keep in mind, and I know this actually slips through the cracks quite a bit, but it's something that I think that we should consider to be important as Americans, and maybe question why this is still not necessarily resolved in some capacity. 4 American hostages remain in Hamas captivity a year after October 7th massacre. So 4 Americans are still being held hostage by Hamas. I mean, I'm sorry, but in many ways, I don't know, unacceptable, right? And they also have 3 bodies of Americans still as well. No matter how you want to look at the response from Israel after October 7th, because obviously a response was warranted and obviously something had to happen. But as America and as Americans, 4 Americans being held hostage isn't acceptable for a year, especially by a low-tech terror organization. What have we done to try to retrieve them? I don't know, right? Oh, we're working with the IDF? Great. Has that worked out very well? Not for a year. Do you think these people are being treated well for a year now? Probably not. Just goes to show you, once again, based on our current administration and government as a whole, that even if you get taken by terrorists and you're an American, don't give your hopes up. Might be a year or more before you ever see anybody trying to help you, right? So listen, I just wanted to bring this up because it's important. Americans are still being held hostage by this organization. Unacceptable. Secretary of State Antony Blinken vowed on Monday that the U.S. will continue to work tirelessly to bring home the 4 American hostages who have now been held by Hamas for more than a year inside the Gaza Strip. The 4 that remain, Keith Seigel, 65, Sagui Dekelchen, 36, Omer Nutra, 22, and Eden Alexander, 21, were abducted by the Palestinian terrorist group exactly 1 year ago, Monday on October 7th, 2023. The abductions took place alongside the murder of approximately 1,200 Israelis. Listen. I don't care where it is in the world. I don't care who's in charge. I don't care what's going on. You gotta get the people back, right? I mean, that's just how it's supposed to work. And if we can't even take care of our own while they're being held hostage and kidnapped in such a fashion, then what confidence do we have that we'll be taken care of in any other capacities, right? So we can't help hurricane victims in the country, stateside. We can't help them as much as they need. And we can't even rescue hostages who've been gone for a year now. Everyone should be looking at the failures of this administration as well as the federal government as a whole and understand that this is not acceptable. You're on your own. No one's coming to save you. These people don't care whether you live or die, and they will use any crisis to their advantage. These hostages are a bargaining chip. They are not being properly retrieved. That's just my opinion, and that's based on the fact that it's been a freaking year. So it's just not looking very good, is it? We got to make some changes. Someone's got to give. I am 100% enthusiastic about the fact that more Americans are saying, hold up, something's not right here. And more Americans are looking at what's happening with the Hurricane Helene disaster relief and saying, I don't think that's acceptable. And then when you start to apply that to the geopolitical stage, in the sense of what's happening in the Middle East, what's happening in Europe, what's happening in all over the entire world, you can see that mismanagement is the name of the game. Many of us knew this already for a very long time. We've known this. But the average person didn't, and now they're going, not really sure if I understand what's happening right here. And that is a good thing because we need those people to have questions. Once you start asking questions, you don't stop because the answers are never provided, right? The basic questions we have, hey, why can't we divert other funds from whatever we're doing and just say it all goes to Helene disaster relief? They won't answer that question. They'll just say, oh, well, there are funds and Congress is going to provide them and we'll get more funds. Okay, but like, couldn't we just take some of that money you guys are already sending other places and just spend it here instead right now? Well, when we have the money that we are going to get allocated to this relief effort, thanks to Congress, we will go ahead and make sure that it gets to where it needs to go. That's the answers you get. And those aren't acceptable answers. In school, you would have gotten an F on your paper because your teacher would have said, well, that's not a real answer. So more people who ask questions, the more people will say, something's not quite right here. And that's good for us. It is. I prep because I want to survive an emergency. I want my family to suffer as little as possible during a long-term event. And because I don't want to have to rely on the government. But I also prep because I don't want to see this country collapse into chaos and dystopia, right? I want us to have a flourishing country. I want us to have a very strong sense of national pride. I want us to, well, be wealthy and healthy, right? And so I prepare because to get to that point, I think we're kind of past the line of things have to get worse before they can get better, right? And I want to help be on the other side of it to say, like, we're going to make this better, right? But in order to do that, we have to be prepared to not have all the things we're used to having. And that's really difficult to consider for a lot of people, right? When we had our fires going on out here in my community, I lost power for most of the day. And then I'm looking at what's going on outside and smoke billowing in my direction and wondering, is that fire coming right at me? Is it going to change directions? Is it going to jump, to another field or over a road or whatever? And it was a miniaturized version of SHTF, for a good chunk of a day. Is that indicative of what it would be like 10 days in? Well, no, of course not. But it does remind you that that's how it would look. You're not going to have all the answers. You're not going to have all the amenities. You're not going to have all the things that you would usually have access to. But if you have the proper supplies and you have what you need on hand in order to get through it, you can focus on some of the other things in the meantime, such as maintaining a strong form of community and being prepared to make things better thereafter, right? And yes, just so everyone's aware, we lost power, but I didn't lose power. I have a backup power system for my house, and it worked very well. But it did mean that we were having to conserve power, right? We were definitely triaging things we didn't need in order to have as much power available as possible before having to regenerate. So, Cherokee Survival, good to see you. This is where we are. Now, we're at an hour. I do have the private live stream going tonight. If you are a Subscribe Star member, you can be part of that live stream, and that is posted on your feed. If you are a channel member, or you would like to be, you can hit the join button down below. You will have access to the private live stream as well, and that will be posted on my channel page under the community tab, and you will see that only if you're a member of the channel. And this is not for me to hide pertinent information behind a paywall. It's for me to say thank you to people who want to support the channel directly, and one of the best ways I found to do that is to do these live streams that are a casual format where we just hang out and talk about whatever. So I appreciate you all 100%. And like I said, I want to mention it one more time. Community members here donated $660 so far to help my little community, which means I can only imagine the outpouring of donations and aid that the victims of Hurricane Helene have received from this same community. And there is nothing more impressive than the way that this community comes together to help other people when that time comes. And that gives me a lot of faith that if things ever do get really bad, or that time ever comes where we need to band together in order to maintain our level of freedom and everything else that we require as, human beings here on this great country of ours, I actually do have a lot of faith that we will take care of each other. And so I honestly, I'm just very grateful and humbled by the fact that so many are willing to help to that degree. So thank you all very much for that. I really appreciate it. James Shriramis, I'm not surprised at this administration's incompetence. I am trying to drive the fact that it's incompetent home, and that it's not just incompetence, but that it's weaponized incompetence. And that's worse because they're doing it on purpose. It's not all incompetence. The worst thing we can do is underestimate our enemies, right? And if you consider the people who are currently in charge to be your political enemy in the sense of wanting something different, then do not underestimate them. Don't assume they're incompetent. Assume they're using incompetence as a weapon and leveraging it as a way to get what they want out of the deal, right? So, thank you all so much. I appreciate every single one of you. I will catch all the members and the Subscribe Star members here in the private live stream in just a minute. And besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.